say hello, and then I'm going to turn the video off if you don't mind. Okay. Great. Is there a way to share screen? Actually, share screen. There we go. I see it. Okay. Screen one, window. All right. Let me know if you folks can. Okay. Great. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Gaiva, Pradeep, Howard, can you guys hear? Yeah, okay, great, okay. See the screen? Okay, all right, thanks everybody for coming to this Emergent session. My name is Lei Wang. I'm at Ohio State in psychiatry. I've invited people, I've decided to have a session on our work in progress to both bring people, bring this to the attention of the field, the work that we're doing, and importantly to solicit some feedback. And I'm sorry if you got directed to the right room, but maybe if you can't find your room or in a different time, you're welcome to stay. And we'll all have a discussion about our project. So we recently got funded by NIDA to work on a platform called NeuroBridge, and the purpose of the platform is to do discoveries of data. And so we know that data are out there. People are doing studies. They collect their own data. So we have all this long tail of scientific data. We're working in the field of neuroimaging, long tail of neuroimaging data. People who do studies, they will collect data and then they will put it somewhere. It'll be great to make use of those data. And so as a user, we often find ourselves in the situation where we say, we want to do a meta-analysis or we want to do a mega-analysis. And where are the data out there and what kind of data are good for me to do my particular kind of study? So I'm in the field of schizophrenia research. And so we often want to find data about schizophrenia and say if they have some fMRI scans, tasks or resting. And very importantly, we often want to relate them to symptoms or cognition. And so here I pose a couple of questions that a user might typically want to find in terms of data. As I said, we realize that some of the data are described in papers, but we have no idea where they are, where they're being shared or not. And some of the data are in existing neuroimaging databases. But not all the data collections are linked. So how do we try to help the user discover where these data are at? How do we describe them properly so that the user have a way of evaluating whether the data the information returned on the data can indicate whether the data are appropriate and useful for their particular clinical question. And the kind of the information that we think are useful for users as, for example, the sample size, the clinical categories, the type of imaging data collected, and the sort of instruments of clinical and cognitive assessments that were being used in the study. And we want our system to be able to provide accurate information on potential databases, data sets, and whether they are potentially available or not. So this is just a graphic about the main components, but we won't go into detail about what NeuroBridge, our long-term goals are. What we really want to focus on today, as part of our conversation, is what we have been doing in the last few months. The project started back in September, October last year. And we came up with what we think are focused minimum viable product that we want to put out as a prototype for in the coming months, and to get your feedback on whether this is you think it's really useful. What are the things you want to see, and what are the things we should do differently? And so we want to guide our session. We focused our product on these two particular kind of information. One is on schizophrenia, fMRI that have studies that have that type of data and contain information on negative symptoms. And another typical one would be some kind of addiction research with fMRI and measuring cognitive function, say executive function. And we've done some work in terms of the text mining component, looking at okay. Oh, that's okay. We've done some text mining work because we wanted to focus on looking for data, discovering data that are described in full text papers. And we have a parallel component on searching neuroimaging databases that won't be the focus of the session today. Okay. So you all know, right? We can do PubMed searches, for example, on these keywords. But there are ways to filter those searches and have more focused searches. But still, you would get papers on depression that mention schizophrenia in the introduction, or papers that are on EEG, but they mention fMRI in the references and so forth. And so, you have to filter those out by hand. And when you do get the correct paper, so here I have two examples, one on intrinsic connectivity and one on resting state, all about schizophrenia, that have the right kind of information. So within the paper, when we look for that kind of information, here I highlighted. This paper collected prospect data from different centers in Europe and the USA. In the meantime, they also used BSNP data, and they provided in the paper about data availability. This particular data set could be found at NITRIC as part of the CodeBreak collection. And the other paper then is a study that collected images from a study in China, and they describe typical parameters for the imaging acquisition, the imaging type, and this is made available, but the user would have no idea whether that has been and where it is and so forth. So this is sort of the information we want to succinctly and quickly and accurately provide to the users so they can make a decision on what to do with that. And so we've come up with our approach is that we will still provide a search capability to the users, but our searches will be based on ontology. And this way we can standardize across different kinds of information source. And we can also easily expand from there. And so we'll talk to you, show you some of the work we are doing with in the ontology. And basically these are the steps that we're doing. And then so when we have ontology-based searches or subtrees, then we work on using the ontology-based information to do text mining of full text papers. Okay. Basically, the idea is that we can match search strings that the user input from our front end with ontological subtrees, and we have a process of turning text to ontology, the back end that we're still working on. Okay. So the ontology work, part of it is we want to leverage what's already built out there. One of these tools that we can use is the ontology lookup service, or OLS. So what we're doing is, suppose user input queries search back end that we called our NeuroBridge ontological steps. and we would use natural language processing and query auto-completion and so forth using ontology. And the NeuroBridge ontology concepts then will go into become parent and children concepts. And here we'll utilize ontology preservation and traversal approaches. And implementation, what we're doing is we will implement a copy of this Bioinformatics Institute Ontology Lookup Service API. So we will basically copy what they're doing and implement it locally, and we use their OLS approach, put in our own ontology, and so we can utilize their machinery. So this part of the work is performed by Lei Wang and Howard Lander, and they're part of the NeuroBridge consortium there at University of North Carolina, Rensselaer. Okay. And as far as the actual ontology, what we're doing is we are leveraging two separate ontologies that we've previously developed. One is called ProvCare, is an ontology developed based on work by Satya Sahu, who's at Case Western University. And then the one that we previously developed as part of the SkizConnect project. And so here I show an example of on the left side is a schizophrenia ontology, and on the right is an example of addiction ontology, substance disorder. And so here we also leverage the existing ontologies that's out there and import them, and we integrate them together and call that the NeuroBridge ontology. And so these ontologies are in these tree structures, and the idea is that we will use the OLS sort of approach to match keyword searches that the user initiates, match with the subtrees and subparts of these ontologies. So that's the one part of our project is to turn user keyword searches into these standardized concepts based on ontologies. And so we'll then somehow use that part of the strings or trees or concepts, and we use that as our way to search matching terms or matching concepts that's described in full text papers. And so the way we're thinking to do that is we need to annotate some of the papers so that we can train a machine learning algorithm that can mine these papers, mine them to turn patterns of words into the ontological concepts. And so that's the idea. We will have this database of concepts and machine learning pattern recognition for these concepts. And then when user inputs new searches, that's how we can find related concepts in potential papers. And so for this part of the project, then we want to train the algorithm with concepts that were built around schizophrenia, neuroimaging, functional imaging, and addiction, and so forth. So we've collected a few hundred PubMed Central full text papers based on these criteria, because we want to collect a set of papers that are close to what we're going to train and develop the algorithms on. So we need to have a limited range, because a couple hundred of these papers are going to be annotated by hand, and we wanted them to be appropriate for our goals. So we looked at a couple of annotation software platforms that could satisfy what we want to do in terms of annotation, because it's labor intensive, and we need to make sure that there's standardization and multi-annotator validation and so forth. And so a couple of platforms that popped up. One is called TeamTat and one is called Inception. And we did some work and we settled on Inception because it seems more easy to use and fit what we want. So here's an example of a schizophrenia paper, and the students. So this part of the work, by the way, is done by Jessica Turner, Matt Turner at Georgia State, Lei Wang and Howard Lander and Hao Xu at North Carolina. So this Inception platform, this is an example of a schizophrenia paper, and so the students go in there and they have the ability to highlight keywords and relate them to ontological concepts, and we're able to, or we're working on, we're already able to import our ontological structure into the Inception framework so that we can match the terms that we see in the papers to the ontological concepts that are imported into the platform. So the students can highlight them, the keywords, and use a drop-down list to annotate the ontological label for that particular keywords. And Inception also allows you to link different words together as part of the ontological concept. And on the right, there's a screenshot of what the output looks like. It's I think it's a JSON file, so that we can have readers of that file and connect that with the machine learning component that's being developed next. So there's another example of this is an example of an addiction, I think alcohol use paper. And so in a similar process, the annotator could highlight the keywords and match it to ontological concepts that's in the platform. And so this process, this platform allows for multiple raters to annotate the same document, and then there's a reconciliation process that reconciles differences and so forth. Okay, so that's current work that we're doing, and that's where we are now. And here you will see that our goal is really to return, once we have the machine learning algorithm developed, we use these concepts and trained on these annotated data, and we'll be able to pull out things that are related to what the users are searching for. And so one of the questions that we're wondering is, exactly how would the user would like, the information to be returned to them. So I'll show you a list of questions that can start the discussion. And so here, just briefly, that once we work out the concept, the keyword search to concept process, I think that one is pretty much done. Then a similar approach that we use to go and search papers, we want to use that approach to also search for neuroimaging databases. That's based on mediation approaches. And so that work is about to start, and that will be led by Jose Luis Ambiti at Southern California, and Dan Marcus and Steve Moore at WashU, and along with myself. So the questions that we would like to pose for today's to the attendees today is what are the ontologies that we should be thinking about, right? In terms of areas of mental health, mental disorders, diseases. So what do we know about where these ontological sources are at? And should we import all? Because we've looked at a few, and they're pretty comprehensive. Should we import all of them and try to sort out the differences? Because they're all different from one another. Should we partially import, and what's the right strategy? What's the right approach for constructing these ontologies into one, or maybe we shouldn't think about just one. What will the user be searching for? These examples that we use are what we think we would do as researchers. But what would you think? What are the feedback from the community? What sort of things that the users, a potential user, would want to look for? And what are the things that you want to see for this immediate prototype? And what are the things that are kind of more long-term wish lists? So I'll leave this list on the screen, and if people have thoughts that you want to pipe up, please feel free to do that, and we can monitor the chat window for questions as well. Okay, so I see a lot of chats had flown by. I wasn't paying attention. So let's see, where should we start? Do you guys all have audio, or is this all through the chat? Okay. Oh, invite people on stage. Okay, how do I? Okay. Maybe I guess if you want to just tell me who you want. I got it. Okay, yeah. Both chat. Okay, so who wants to be on stage? Just put it in the chat, and I guess we can invite people if you want to talk. So, by the way, are the chats recorded? I mean, can we, if I miss something, can I look at it later? Because that would be very useful. Okay. Oh, where is the? Oh, here's the question. Okay. Dave Peter said, what we've been doing in NIDM is importing ontologies from others, making the links in our ontology so that each separate ontology can be maintained. Yeah. Yeah. Dave, do you want to be? Sure. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Peter. Can you do that, host, or do I have to invite him? How do I invite him? Invitation sent. Okay, great. Okay. Let me know when you're on. So while we're waiting for Dave to come on stage, my take on our differences is that, we don't just link with ontologies. We actually want to have ontologies in our platform because we want to match the ontological concepts with what's in the papers and what's in the searches. But we can think about what you said. Okay, go ahead, yeah. Dave, on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to speak to your question. I guess I am now thinking about what you just said, but I mean, essentially by importing. So one of my concerns about importing the ontologies into your NeuroBridge ontology, and then I don't know if you're proposing to modify those imported ontologies in some certain way and kind of merge them into NeuroBridge. But I guess my concern is that, yeah, each of those ontologies are, maintained by separate groups, and there may be updates and changes to those. And if you import them once and then make it, modifications. So, yeah, I was just pointing out our approaches as I mentioned.
I think that's a good pointer. So we may figure out a way to dynamically do this rather than statically do it. We might be able to go out and match other ontologies on the fly versus doing it within our platform. Okay, yeah, I think that's something really worthwhile.
And a shout out to Arno Klein's mental health database ontology. I think that's a good one that you probably want to have a look at in terms of importing.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Satra.
Hey, everyone.
JB, Pradeep. Yeah.
So, quick question for
Go
you,
ahead,
Lei.
you all have the floor.
I think
Yeah.
that second question that you have, which is what will the user search for, is super important. And I don't know if you've kind of done some kind of survey or a set of competency questions that might help guide you. So that's the kind of thing that it's easy for us to kind of see what we might want to see, but
Yeah.
a user is likely searching for something else.
Right. Yeah.
And part of the question there might be how you might want to change search, because we're all used to doing Google searches and other things, but
Right.
or Google Scholar search, but you have the opportunity to change how people do search in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things we did. We didn't do an exact survey because we were too late. I was too lazy. But what we did was we went. So we had the Skids Connect platform, right? And that's basically for people to who are looking for schizophrenia imaging data, and try to analyze that along with clinical data. So and all the searches that people have done through the years were recorded in that platform. So we basically went in there and did a rough look at how people search for data on our platform. It's kind of a proxy of a survey, a quick and dirty way of looking at it. And I fell into two broad categories. One, they just want everything. They just went in and said, "Give me every." All the data sets, all the clinical categories. Even though we build a coins like search interface where you can pull in, you can narrow down, you can filter, and so forth. Some people just wanted everything, and then there are some people who actually, most of them are, as I remember, most of them just wanted everything. So that's why we thought, maybe just start with these broad questions. Some people, they just want schizophrenia clinical, and then once they process things, they can narrow things down. And yeah, so maybe, how do you target the user service? People get service all the time. So what do you think? Who should we pull it from? Yeah, Pradeep, you have.
Yeah, so
You
I'm
raise
of,
your hand. Pradeep.
yeah, yeah, wonderful, great effort, Lei. I really like this, So I think it's a very
Thanks.
hard problem, because oftentimes, we, like you said, we run many surveys, and sometimes people don't know what they want until we show it to them. So one of the wishes I have personally is something like a Google alert we have for papers, So roughly define a category and send me everything. I'll figure out what I want to use, right? And that's also useful partly because these ontologies, as accurate as they may be, are confusing because there is a lot of terms collisions, and goals are different. People describe them in a different way and stuff like that. Unless you actually see it, process it in a way, you don't know whether it's useful or not. Right? Sometimes you get new ideas when you actually come across a new data set or a few different data sets that have some common characteristics or something. So as you gave the talk, one thing that occurred to me is that I think a regular crawler that actually just mines various papers published in relevant journals, let's say top 100 or whatnot, that builds a data set, and then that has the ability to just basically send out updates to users, subscribe to certain key terms and other filters, so to say. I think that would be very useful, then people can
All right, Pradeep, I'm
yes.
gonna tap into your brain going forward, and we'll connect on this. I think that would be really helpful for us, if you don't mind.
Of course. Yeah. So
Great.
I mean, you could survey the users too, obviously.
Okay, let me stop screen sharing because they said we can see the panel better. All right, now how do I stop? I've gotten started. How do I stop? Stop sharing. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Now you're all big now. Okay. All right. Want to hear from JB or Dave Kennedy?
Where is Lei?
Did we not hear? I'm hiding. Let me see. I'll try to put my. Where's the video button? I'm so used to Zoom. I'm like you singularly tunneled with Zoom buttons. I'm trying to. I'm sorry. I don't
It's just
see
like
my,
the search process.
Yeah.
We are singularly tunneled.
That's right.
So,
oh, here we go. Somebody turned it on for me. Holy cow.
There you go.
Okay.
So I was going to make another comment because I heard you mentioned Dave Kennedy, and then on your questions to ask slide, I think toward the bottom with search databases. And so when I was listening to your presentation, I thought this would be really cool. So, in ReproNim, Dave Kennedy's center, that they've been developing that Repro Lake tool for searching across publicly available data sets. And the idea is using metadata to do that, which sounds pretty similar. So I thought it'd be really cool to connect those resources together, your resource, NeuroBridge and Repro Lake, to expand our ability to search across data sets. I mean, it's a slightly different focus, but I think it would be super cool. That's just a comment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've been talking to him since the early part of the project with the intention of losing those things, and that was another. I didn't focus on that today because we're talking about papers, because these platforms are mainly for neuroimaging data, and so in a parallel effort, we're working with the XNAT platforms because there are lots of different XNATs, and they have also I think a new capability or new feature of publishing metadata through the API. And so the idea is to search on the XNAT metadata for these data sets. But yes, absolutely, Dave's ReproNim. Well, you guys are all involved, right?
Yeah. I mean, the NIDM terms effort is also doing something similar in the sense that it's annotating data sets with these high-level concepts to search. So, I think connecting all these different efforts to focused on finding data sets, even if they're slightly different where they're getting their sources from, is fantastic, in my opinion.
Yeah, and can I make a quick comment, Lei?
Yeah.
I was going to say, and I can't remember the name of the guy who asked about wanting alerts. Oh, hold on. Stupid thing. If I remember correctly, one of the things we were thinking about doing when we got hooked up with XNAT was very similar to that, right? So, we would say, oh, okay, well, here comes papers. And if somebody said they're interested in things like this, we could maybe send an alert. But, that's not going to be part of my guess is not going to be part of the first year or the second year, but we have a 4-year grant. So hopefully we get to that. So I do think it's very cool.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
I must say I like the idea of Pradeep of a quick hey, I've got a new data set. Where do I send that minimalist meta information? But minimalist, but better than or larger than what Google dataset does. I mean, I think if we could have a little GUI and say, hey, send that to Repro Lake or send that to then it would become powerful. The question is, how do we curate and how do we is there a curation process or is there like something that would filter things that should not go there?
I remember when we met couple years ago, Chris was still working on the BIDS project. I asked whether they can, when people convert things to BIDS, that's an opportunity for people for that converter to send information, centrally. So they can inform, if there's BIDS central that somebody is converting a BIDS data set, and we can record some information. So I think that's an opportunity to record some information. Hey, I have a data set. It's somewhere here. I mean that's what I would suggest. We can work with Rust project, at least on the BIDS data. So when somebody has a new data set, they're using that BIDS tools, right? So they can function and then send some location data creators and sort of information to some centralized database with content, of course. And then we can work with the BIDS people for that sort of discovery.
Like, can I ask a question about your NLP and text search? What is the likelihood of, say, pulling out claims from papers?
Claims?
Claims.
What do you mean?
Results.
As in, yeah, what the paper is saying that they are claiming in the paper.
Mm-hmm. Didn't we talk about this either last meeting or the meeting before that?
Oh, wait, you mean like a conclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways,
like,
because it seems like that's the
mean?
kind of thing that becomes an easy search entry point as well, is you're looking to say,
Yeah.
I'm looking for this kind of relation, does this exist? And if a paper made that claim somewhere or close to that claim, that's now a claim matching process to a user search. But since you're investigating this through NLP tools, I'm asking to what it still seems like a difficult task, but the extent to which
it seems extra difficult. Well, you're more of the machine learning expert than I am. I mean, you're talking almost like emotional context, of the paper, of the linguistics now, right? I think that's even harder. But aren't people working on that? I'm not familiar with pulling that sort of information out of papers, but
so
I think
idea.
that's.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're not the first one to ask that question, right? I've heard people ask that. How do we find papers that have reported certain results or implications or something?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you suggest?
So one of the things we have been thinking about a little bit is seeing if BioArchive would create a field when you submit to BioArchive, which simply says, here are 3 things that our paper claims to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that would be one way of creating kind of the user endpoint to provide something.
Yeah.
Can
I was going to say, if the papers have structures, then that will help these sort of searches. They'll put certain things in certain sort of titled categories. Yeah. But that doesn't exist yet. So you can't. So right. Yeah. So if you search the current paper for conclusions, that's very difficult. But right. So if you create a structure, that will help it.
Yeah, I was mostly thinking that you mentioned that one of your thrusts is doing NLP. So if kind of going a little bit beyond topic modeling to saying, could I get something out? And that might be a 2-stage process, using some of the things that JB and others are working on in annotating abstracts and papers. but coupling that with whatever interface you come up with, so that if there is no claim made, maybe the user can say, provide an annotation on the paper.
I like that.
Yeah. What you would need to really, for our approach, you'd sort of, I think, want something that claimed to be an ontology of results, right? And then
so Satra, are you suggesting, so the way currently we're envisioning this works is that back that's relevant that's appropriate to their search. So if they're searching for conclusions then it's not there, it's not going to come back to them, and maybe that means we can put in a sort of a suggestion feature that the user say, hey, this paper has this,
Right.
and then they send it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh,
Dave, we
people
all
are dropping off. What's going on?
No, we just stopped our videos.
Oh, you're still
because
here.
Yeah,
We're
I'm
all
still
here.
Okay. That's good.
So, but your video,
Yeah.
your audio quality wasn't good, so we dropped our video to see if that would help.
I was wondering why I was
that's
the only one on the
mostly my
screen.
local. Yeah, that's locally my problem, because I live a place that have a narrow band, not broadband. So if I have video, then people can't hear me anymore. But you guys are okay. But okay, I think Kennedy wants to say things. He's been.
The only thing I was going to add is to 1+ this claim structure, extraction, not being an NLP person and not having found, easily with the couple I've asked, a way to do it automatically. Probably like JB, we've been doing manual annotation of that, and we've been using sort of the hypothesis overlay, using tags, and have a way to mark claims and standardize those claims, concentrating on the volumetric literature, but hoping that such a set of manual claim associations with the actual text might support future NLP extraction of that. So it's sort of still a work in progress, but we have a few 1,000 claims from 300 or 400 papers in sort of that nether zone. And again, run into all the same ontology things. The paper said bipolar, but is that really how do you mark these things appropriately? The paper says NAC for nucleus accumbens, and standardizing all that kind of stuff, et cetera, which you guys all know well. But
yeah. So did you develop?
I imagine we'd be working on. Hey Dave, I imagine we'd be working on different papers. We're annotating the basic concepts, and you're annotating claims. Can we maybe swap? Maybe we'll send our papers that's already annotated on terms, and you guys can annotate the claims. And it seems like we can expand this pool of annotated papers to have these concepts and claims. That may be really useful.
Absolutely. And I keep hoping when I say this out loud, someone's going to say, "Oh yes, there's this NLP there that already does this," but I've failed at ever hearing that. So
No, right.
That would be very interesting to have like a crowdsourced annotation of papers on various aspects of the paper. So what we're doing in the lab is like annotating more like the methodological aspect of a paper. So how many subjects, what method have been used, and but if you're annotating the claims, if someone else is annotating, some the concepts, having like a common way of it'd be very, very interesting.
What
common place to aggregate those together, and I was gonna say one more thing. I forgot it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I want to ask, when you're doing the annotation of the claims, what vocabulary are you using for the annotation?
Well, therein is a tricky bit, and so we have to be super careful about that, which is why we're super hyper-focused on sort of volumetric, fairly vanilla volumetric observations,
Right.
that the hippocampus is larger in people with, schizophrenia compared to, healthy controls, co-varying for X, Y, and Z, and things like that. So we can do, these, sort of t-testy, the between group testy types of things, and we also trying to report the no difference things as well, larger than, less than, correlates with, and the covariates, and and things like that. But anything,
Yeah.
if you get to funkier structures, or if you get to funkier relationships, the third principal component, blah, 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 which, or, ultra complex, interaction effects, we don't really have the ontology of the inference of the claim, the meaning, the human meaning of the claim.
Right.
And it is quite frankly offensive. I mean, we have so much trouble decoding what people say. The variability of how things can be said is so ambiguous, terms and ways of saying things. So yeah, you can resolve that if you go back into the paper. But again, we're trying to be fast and, take their words and turn them into the claims. But there's lots of errors in the words. People aren't very precise, and that's going to be half of the outcome of here is how badly we say things. And to get more to possibly what Satra was alluding to with BioArchive, part of the reason to spend the exercise, not only to help NLP do it, but is this has to be done by the humans at the submission or acceptance time.
Right.
Make it simple and quick. And we're only doing this retrospectively to show that it might be useful and how horrible the literature is, so that you got to do it retrospectively.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, that to change the way we kind of practice as authors. But some of the journals already have something that's close to it, right? NeuroImage and other things have this highlight section, and we just need to maybe mandate people who write highlights and write a couple of make sure 2 highlights are about claims or something like that.
Highlight about claim and making sure the syntax of that claim is in a standardized representation, which is bad for people who like to write flowy prose, but is much better.
We can provide structure for that.
Machine action.
You could always ask for metadata, right? Hey,
right, yeah, and you don't have to have humans read this. The point is, the machine readability side of it. So
yeah.
Well, but part of the task would be to sell it to the editors, right? I mean, it has to be useful for the journal, and so what's the benefit for them to standardize this claims submission? Then they'll want to do it. But I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I know we went off into this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Howard.
Well, have you been doing phrase analysis too? Then, I mean, because it's one thing to say, 100 people with diabetes do have, larger instances of dying, versus 100 people with diabetes do not have larger chances of dying. You know what I mean? So it's medical records or anything about it's one thing to try to say, well, this paper is about this, right? So it's okay, this paper is about diabetics and their risk of dying. That's one thing. But to try to say, this paper is about diabetics having a larger risk or a smaller risk, then it's really, really difficult because of the phrase issue.
All right, so we have 4 minutes or 3 minutes. I think they're actually going to just have a shut it off.
Okay.
So last minutely, I guess we'll follow up with your suggestions on the ontologies. I'll think about the survey. I'll reach out to Pradeep about what he's thinking, and we all gonna circle back to Ripronim. That's I think that would be our ongoing collaboration. But Satra, your question on we might change the way we let people search. So do you have any specific suggestions? On this is sort of is we think about keyword searches right now, because that's a lot of ontological databases do keyword searches, right? We used to do our SchizConnect kind of search for pull downs, and those seem a little too restricted in terms of choices. So
one of the things that I think could be implemented so you start off with, we can't return all the most accurate results. So could you start with a Lei text search where they just put in either keywords or a question in English? It gets interpreted into your ontological vocabulary, and that's not going to be a perfect thing to start with, but and then that turns into a faceted search to return the results.
Yeah, well, we were actually going to do, the keyword is not going to be exact. We were thinking about fuzzy searches and similarities and closeness and so forth. So we wanted to give people a variety of returns on there, at least the text that seemed to match. And then we wanted to give the user the ability to further edit their searches based on the initial returns, before we go out and search papers. But using turning questions into concepts, okay, that's good. It seems hard to me, but is that something that there's tools that we can use to extract from questions?
Yeah, so there are many NLP entity recognition tools, which would be a first pass, right? And one of the links I posted, you might want to take a look at it, is this Biomed Explorer that Google launched last year. And it was focused on COVID to start with, and now they've opened it up for everything. And they have this notion of, you can put in a question, it'll return a set of results. You can keep adding questions to it, and it'll refine those results as new questions are added. So it's kind of a different way of thinking about search rather than just keyword-based search that Google Scholar or other things do.
Yeah, but you said there are toolkits that,
there are NLP toolkits that do all kinds of entity recognition or fuzzy matching. So those kind of exist as tools. You'll have to create the glue part, I think, based on how you're deriving the ontology mapping to your data sets or papers.
Sure. Okay. But the mechanics of turning.
The mechanics are there, as in there exists many tools now to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I see. Okay. We'll probably, well, if we look into that, and I'll come and tap your brains again about that. That's great. Well, actually, the timer says 52 minutes. But we started late. Do we have time, or are we going to end now? Host. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure where we are, but we're still here. Okay. Howard, were you going to say something?
Well, I think the one thing I would say, when somebody was making a comment basically about it not being exact, and I think in all these systems, I think the one thing the only goal is for it to be useful. It's never going to be exact, right? So when you get results back, if you're a researcher, you can pretty much assume that if you get 20 results back, that if you're lucky, 12 or 15 of them will be useful. I just think that's part of the game. I don't think we're any further along than that. I don't think we're going to be for a while.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what Satra's trying to make a point of, is to be useful, we need to know what users want, both in terms of what they want to search and what they want to see back. So I think that's
so there's another session starting, so they're gonna
okay. So it's a hard stop at the time. All right, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for
everything.
Thanks all.
Yeah, we'll catch up.
Yeah. Bye-bye.